once a spirit in this world. Once she breathed for me, above me, beside me, behind me. Now I feel her warm breath on my neck summer nights, peering over my shoulder as I write every poem, whispering, "Let me in." I let her in. Over 6 award-winning books, Dorianne Laux has consistently invited all of us into her poems. Hers is a distinctive and generous voice, wedded equally to the tough and gritty world and to the tenderness sometimes found in that world or forged from that world. In the poetry of Dorianne Laux, wonder and hard truth live amicably together, as in her poem, Life on Earth. It begins, "The odds are we should never have been born, not one of us, not 1 in 400 trillion to be exact." It ends, "When you think you might be through with this body and soul, look down at an anthill or up at the stars. Remember your gambler chances, the bounty of good luck you were born for." What good luck for all of us that Leila Chatti met Dorianne Laux, with whom she studied in the MFA program of North Carolina State University. In the conversations section of this chapbook, it somehow comes as no surprise to learn that Leila wrote Deluge, her debut poetry collection, at Dorianne's kitchen table. Nor is it surprising to learn that Dorianne once gave Leila a refrigerator magnet that says, "Yay, poetry." Every house needs one of those. I would venture that every house also needs Chatti's Deluge, published by Copper Canyon in 2020, which won the 2021 Levis Reading Prize and received the African Poetry Book Fund's Luce Prize for African Poetry. Chatti's voice is both lush and meditative, as in her poem Pearl Guzzle, which contains the line, "Grief is an heirloom, a rope of pearls handed down." Her poem Eastwood presents an insightful self-portrait of the poet as adolescent, declaring, "There's me, ever the apprentice in tenderness and nerve." Tenderness and nerve, yes, and also a sense of welcome characterize these poems. She speaks directly to her reader, confides as if thinking aloud, the way you speak with a close friend. In Not All of Us Get to Be Ghosts, she writes, "I think our ghosts become us, or at least reside in our dark, like tenants we haven't the heart to kick out." Now comes the moment in today's program when, yay, poetry, we get to welcome Dorianne Laux and Leila Chatti.
Hello, Leila.
Hello, Dorianne. And hello, everyone. It's just so fun to be able to see all these faces.
No, I didn't think we'd be able to.
I know. This is great. This is so exciting. As I'm sure, everybody on the planet knows, I am Dorianne's biggest fan. So this is the greatest honor to be able to work on this project together and to read together. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. Thank you so much to Jen and Margot and Suzanne and all the folks who are helping us with this chapbook and put on this reading tonight. I'm always a little shy talking, but I'm very grateful, and I'm just excited to get started. Yeah, Dorianne, should I start with the first poem?
Yeah, I think you should. First poem in the book.
Let's do it. Let's jump in. Okay, and this poem begins with an epigraph from Sharon Olds, who's also somebody that's in our circle. But this poem is called "The New Mother Speaks," and the epigraph is, "I've kept an eye on that nice young mother. Mother, I understand now how you could have left the child weeping in the sink, how you could have kept the pot on the stove until it seethed, torrents spitting to the floor. Another quiet, ruined evening. They never met your eye when you returned from the dark, instead looked on over your head and flashed smiles like jewelry. That was a certain kind of hell, wasn't it? Years of those nice simpering grins, neat Christmas cards, Sunday mornings of blithe sun and young girls tugging at your skirt, the word shrill as a bird. Mother, mother, mother.
Yeah, what Leila failed to tell you is that beautiful poem is written in a form.
It is.
Right?
It is. It's a
Terrence
golden shovel.
Golden shovel, Terrence Hayes' form that he invented. And so at the end of every line is one word in order from the quote that she uses for Sharon Olds. So if you read down the right-hand side of the page for this poem, you can hear the line, I have kept an eye on that nice young mother.
Dorianne knows my secrets.
Oh, I love that form, and I just think it's such a wonderful way to pay tribute to someone. I wrote one with Gwendolyn Brooks, you know, from a line from one of her poems. I am not deceived. I do not think it is still summer.
Oh,
you know,
what a line.
And it was just so much fun to get those words in there at the end of every line. So I'm just going to follow with the second poem in the book, which Suzanne, by the way, thank you, Suzanne, for that lovely, lovely intro. She quoted a few lines from this. It also appears just this month in the issue of the new issue of the APR American Poetry Review magazine, so you can read it there before maybe read it in the book. Although the book is said to be coming any minute, right? It's
hot off the presses, both of them.
Right. So you'll be receiving it if you've ordered it soon.
Oh, see, Jen's holding it up, or Suzanne's holding it up. That's okay.
Oh, what, the APR?
Yeah.
Great.
Cover star, Dorianne.
There we go. Well, they say getting on the cover of the APR is the equivalent of getting on the cover of the Rolling Stones. So, you know, my goose is cooked. You know. Anyway, this is for my mother, and it's called Spirit Level. And for those of you who may not be carpenter minded, the spirit level is that little rectangular thing that's filled with a little ball of water and alcohol, and to get a beam straight, you know, you make sure that the little bubble is between these two lines. And it begins with an epigraph from Gary Snyder, who writes, when making an axe handle, the pattern is not far off. This assumes, of course, you're making an axe handle with an axe, which I can't even imagine. Spirit level. My mother was either horizontal on the couch or vertical, a plumb line from her spine to the top of her head to the ceiling that spins when she drinks. Alcohol and an air bubble trapped, sealed, and fixed inside her, her face carved from wood, a tear gliding slowly down the curve of her cheek. My mother was once a spirit in this world. Once she breathed for me, above me, beside me, behind me. Now I feel her warm breath on my neck, summer nights, peering over my shoulder as I write every poem, whispering, let me in. I let her in. I remember every time she picked me up or set me down, put me to bed or woke me from dreams. And now I see how my whole life has been a dream, one she built for me from the ground up. Her daughter, my mother, the axe, beautiful tool with which she shaped me, a house much like the one she lived in, but smaller, fewer rooms, a tiny, unusable attic, and a cluttered basement. I let her in. like she let me in. She became my carpenter, stonemason, and bricklayer, piling me up cell by cell, the blade that shaped my legs, my arms, my surveyor, millwright. She used herself as a template, her genes tough, her organs elastic, her eyes and nose, forehead and mouth. And when her body, from which my body was made, was slipped into the hot retort, I burned too. She refused the beveled casket, the oiled mahogany box, last drawer for the dead, wanted only the fury of fire, the blue-white flames unmaking her with their licking tongues. House her grandmother built, and her grandmother before her, all of them giving what they had been given, the hardwood floors, staircases and banisters, their deepest cupboards, their heavy doors flung wide so the breeze I would be could blow through.
Oh, I love that. You're so good, Dorianne. I'm going to read the one that follows, which also focuses on an object, but I guess an organic one, which is the pearl. This is Pearl Ghazal, which is in a form too, if you're familiar with the Ghazal. My mother's mother was named for a bright shining. My mother, a pearl. Myself, dark floor of heaven, across which the moon rolls, like a pearl. As a child, I tried to die. The school called my mother, and my mother called me to say, sometimes I wish you had never been born. Before I was born, I was a pearl in my mother's pocket. I try to imagine what it was like to be inside my mother, inside her mother. Try to see myself in the girl flashing pearly whites in a sepia photograph in the last year of her 20s. Imagine myself part of some light shining through her, the layer beneath the pet layer of the pearl that makes it glow. My grandmother was born in June, like me, twin Geminis 55 years apart. Our birthstone, pearl, which is not a stone, but a gem, queen of them, once valued beyond measure. In the parable of the pearl of great price, heaven is the pearl for which the merchant trades all else to attain. Mami is a Japanese unit of weight, 3.75 grams, used to value loose or stringed pearls, pronounced mami. Perhaps foolishly, I've assumed because I was born first, my mother wanted me. Wise enough, never asked. A pearl is made in defense against an irritant, a parasite or fragment invading the mollusk's soft center. Mother of pearl is named such for a root of mother, mader, means sediment, dregs, filth. Briefly, I mothered. What I made dropped from me like pearls from a strand cut. Before my mother was my mother, her hair was black as Cleopatra's, clever woman who dropped her pearl earring into vinegar and swallowed its sediment for a bet. I am the mother of no one ever born. My no one was due in June. Eve, the first mother, wept pearls when she was cast from heaven. My mother never wept in front of me, was never soft, hardened early. She lost her mother like a pearl earring as a teen. Hardly had one before that. Despair for weeks, years, then snow glittered in the yard like crushed pearls. As a girl, I asked my mother where her mother was. My mother turned to look at me, her look blank as the face of a pearl, which never ends. Hard as my mother is, I've always wanted her life to be easier, so mine might be. Grief is an heirloom, a rope of pearls, handed down. Oh, girls, where were your mothers? I am a woman now trying to live. For weeks, years, I daughter my mother. I treasure my little pearl of foolishness, the belief I may be different, may survive the dark, dark as my mother's hair, may string a life of days like pearls, hoard them preciously. Margaret, are you grieving? Hurt shines on both sides, like heaven. I call my mother. All day the sky comes down, leaves on the window, pearls.
So beautiful. I so much love that you use, that word MoMA, which means, the absolute wonder of the fact that so many things have that word pearl and mother attached to them,
Yeah.
is
I was so interested in, we'll talk
wonder.
about it at some point, I'm sure, but the idea of the ghazal is those pearl necklace that could be rearranged, and that idea was interesting.
It's a beautiful ghazal.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to read a poem about a Singer sewing machine. And some of you, if you're too young, may not remember this, but we, as older people, all had Singer sewing machines in our homes somewhere. And we all made our own clothes, believe it or not. And so we all had little factories in our houses, where we made clothes. And so this is a poem from my mother called Singer. And again, if you're not familiar with the old Singer sewing machine, there's a treadle. And you push the treadle in order to get the wheel to spin. Singer. If I could go back to the living room window of my childhood house, look again through the pane, it would be a telescope lens through which I might see the first woman I ever met, my mother at her sewing machine, rewinding the bobbin, little spool with holes like an old movie reel our tiny lives spun inside of. I might see her long piano fingers touch the balance wheel, the throat plate, the presser bar, one bare foot working the treadle, her heel revealing only the first 3 letters in black latticed metal, sin. My mother was what some called a sinful woman, divorced, pregnant without a husband, a baby boy given up for adoption, remarried, another baby born of another man, a one-night stand while her husband was away at war. She drank too much, thought too much, laughed with her head thrown back, danced with anyone. Too pretty, too brainy, too tall, her black hair a snare that hooked men in. But right now, she's fully visible, stretching the fabric for a kitchen curtain, a child's dress, swatches she salvaged from the deep sale bins, using the selvage for a hem, thereby cutting her handiwork by half. The black oiled mechanism banging out dress after dress, tablecloths and runners, nothing she couldn't cobble together from the waste of others. She was a very particular, peculiar mother, and by now you can see why we loved her. She was a lit fuse in the rain. She turned from her work and set those same fingers on the piano keys and pulled music through the air. Making something from nothing was what she was good at. Love, children, pants and skirts to dress them in, a table covered with cherries on which the beautiful food appeared, roses from her front yard garden in an old cracked vase, her long arms around our shoulders, saying, sit still, eat, try not to spill anything.
I love that. I love your portrait of your mother. I love the way you describe her. So good. And I do know of these sewing machines because I had one handed down to me by my
Did
mother.
you? Was
I
it an old one or a new one?
An old one. So it is quite hefty.
Yeah, they're huge machines, heavy. Iron, you know, made out of iron and steel.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm going to skip, I think, a poem and move ahead one. And this form is also, this is a poem also in form, but it's in the form that I learned from you, Dorianne, which was to take the last words of a poem you love and put them as the last words of your poem and write toward those end words. And I had seen you doing those with Malay, right? Is that Malay, right? And I thought that was so exciting as like a, I don't know, almost like a sestina or something, but
yeah.
hidden
though. I mean, nobody would know unless they knew
what
poem you pulled them from.
Yeah. So I wrote one after a poem by Plath, Sylvia Plath, and it's the same title as hers, which is Childless Woman. A year and still this womb dark silence I grope through, moon cold tile, I pad alone. In other houses, children go on sleeping. The mothers do not stir. Rosy lines in the window, dawn crossing the room like a daughter into bed. Here, a knot of shadow unfurls in water. Again, I analyze its threads. I hold myself accountable, then, at a distance, achieve nothing but grief. Wash in a haze again my body, the lights off and ivory towels in the closet, stark as a shriek. A year of days passed like mirrors, and each one, myself, brutally unchanged. Unbidden as an image rising in the mind, rag of cloud and blood punctual sun. Morning, humiliation red. Grim trail through no forest, I vanish behind me, drops measured as a funeral cortege. Hours on my knees, of this, until I slip back into sheets, dreams blank as corpses. Write the word to give me to end on, Plath, corpses.
Yeah, you don't know where you're going or where you're gonna end, and that's good. Right?
Horses into weird places.
Yeah, as soon as you know, you're sunk. Let's see. I think I'll read this other one about my mother. And it's called The Cup. And I kind of did probably a little bit of what you did, Leila, for the pearl. I kind of looked up the cup, and found certain things out about it that appear in the poem. The cup. Shells are hollowed out stones, curved bones, woven leaves, shaped clay, glazed and fired, tin, porcelain, glass, pale ceramic, paper or plastic. The cup, we are told, holds on, invented by no one, made to contain and appease water, tea, coffee, hot chocolate or pudding, carrot soup, a carnival of uses. One-handled, two-handled, painted or plain. There is no one, I imagine, who is against the cup. Even the unmatched cup, alone in its namesake cupboard, its twin having fallen with a great noise to the floor in shards and stars. A grandmother, somewhere in time, packed her cups in a suitcase, carried them into the new world on a ship, the frosted waves clashing and shattering under the tin foil moon. Not one of her packed cups cracked. When she died, she left them to her daughter, who swaddled them in newsprint, her hands shaking as she put them away, the same hands she cupped around her mother's face, drinking her in before the last wave washed her away.
Love that. And I love,
I read up about the history of cups, and nobody invented the cup. I thought that was the best fact ever.
it just magically, it's here, it's us, it's for us. I love how you take, domestic life, Dorianne, and you breathe all this life into it, all these objects, like walking around with you in life is just like, you'll notice everything and how everything is interesting. And I think that means that you are very, very interesting as a person because you're interested in everything.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm never bored.
You're never bored, and you're not boring. I would read a poem by you about anything, including, of course, cups, but plates, forks, whatever you've got next, I'm on board for.
Whatever you got. I'm fine.
I think I'll skip to another poem too. I think I'm going to read Trying, which is a little bit ahead in the thing, but I might flip back to a poem at some point, maybe. But I'll go to Trying, which is not in form. So this one is very unruly. It's free verse. Yeah. Okay.
A poem of chaos.
A poem of chaos, indeed. Trying. When I see the article about the polar bears wandering into Russian homes, I leave it open unread for a week and consider this trying. Because I am trying to be honest, I can't say I'm doing my best or even trying my best, but at the very least, at my very worst, I'm trying. I wake up and this is trying, by which I mean I am sad and yet participate in the requisite functions of my life, usually without audible complaint or demonstrative suffering, trying for others' benefit to be polite, or trying to be honest because I'm embarrassed to be suffering. But I also mean this, that I'm sad and it is difficult, a trial, a circumstance that tries my patience. The sadness is so annoying. I'm so sad, it drives me crazy. Like everyone else, I try to do the dishes, to remember birthdays, not to pick at my degenerate skin. Because I am female, I try to fulfill domestic labors like cleaning out the fridge and unreciprocated kindness. I try to improve my appearance without making it evident I care about my appearance. I try to care about the right things while making it clear I am still trying with my appearance so that men might consider fucking me. And I should consider this privately the measure of my worth. And because I'm American, I try to keep up with the crisis d'allure, with the domestic politics and public displays of rage. I try to be productive. I try to remember reusable bags for my produce, to reduce my footprint, to check pronouns and my privilege. I try to do my part to cause little harm, but because I am alive, harm comes with the territory. The territory upon which I rent is stolen, the city gentrified, and all year an unseasonable heat that I, minor accomplice, have to try very hard not to delight in. Short sleeves in February, sweating through Halloween. I admit it. For no defensible reason, I still eat meat, still drive on occasion to the CVS down the street. I've been known to tell a joke that verges on meme. I'm trying, I mean it, to be good in a way that is not covertly gendered or self-serving, to be accountable, to practice virtue without announcement, to make at least half as good what I leave as how I found it. Trying for you, ink blot, mirage, standing in the artificial dawn on cold tile, golden dew on a stick, first snow, pawing at the window to get in.
That is just a crazily beautiful poem.
It's hard these days.
That's all we're trying, yeah, all we're doing, just trying to care about the right things.
Yeah.
trying to create our appearance so that we appear to not be concerned with our appearance. I just love it. Let me see, we have, okay, I'll go ahead and read Life on Earth, which Suzanne mentioned as well. And again, this is a poem that's not strictly about my mother, but a mother appears. So we felt that was okay. To have her in. Life on Earth. The odds are we should never have been born. Not one of us. Not one in the 400 trillion, to be exact. Only one among the 250 million released in a flood of semen that glides like a glassine limousine filled with tadpoles of possible people, one of whom may or may not be you, a being made of water and blood, a creature with eyeballs and limbs that end in fists, a you with all your particular perfumes, the chords of your sinewy legs singing as they form, your organs humming and buzzing with new life, moonbeams lighting up your brain's gray coils, the exquisite hills of your face, the human toy your mother longs for, your father yearns to hold, the unmistakable you who will take your first breath, your first step, bang a copper pot with a wooden spoon, trace the lichen growing on a boulder you climb to see the wild expanse of a field, the one whose heart will yield to the yellow forsythia, named after William Forsythe. Not the American actor with piercing blue eyes, but the Scottish botanist who discovered the buttery bells on a highland hillside, blooming to beat the band, zigzagging down an unknown Scottish slope. And those are only a few of the things you will one day know, slowly chipping away at your ignorance and doubt. You who were born from ashes and will return to ash. When you think you might be through with this body and soul, look down at an anthill or up at the stars. Remember your gambler chances, the bounty of good luck you were born for.
What a perfect poem. I love that. It's so big, and then like the zooming in and the zooming out, and yeah, the just miraculous strangeness of our being here and our meeting and all these things. I mean,
it's crazy. It's just crazy.
Oh, the bounty of luck indeed. It's so good. That's so good. Dorianne, you're so good.
Oh, dear, dear, dear.
I think I'm gonna read Eastwood.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm in East Lansing actually right now. So that's my hometown. And it's the home of Eastwood Town Center, which is what I am writing about in this poem. And yeah, I avoided writing about my hometown for some time, and then now I'm letting it in. So I started with a strip mall.
Or not.
Yeah.
It's where the action is.
Where the action, it's where, as you will soon see, the action is there at Eastwood, which was pretty, when it was built, which was in my adolescence, it was like an exciting new thing in my part of town. It had been like this big empty area. And then there was all of a sudden shops and a movie theater, so pretty cool. Eastwood. Because it's June and there's nothing to do, we go to the strip mall at the edge of town. Someone's mother drives us. It isn't mine. These girls, they've got hair blaring red as a siren. No curfews, boyfriends and rumors of going all the way. I'm 14 and buttoned up in a blouse, bespectacled, a little shy. But last summer I tried to die, which makes me interesting. We loiter in the moist heat of the parking lot, calling lewd things to strangers across the relucent sea of asphalt, laughing with our whole mouths. every part of us gleams. Our licked fingers sticky from free Krispy Kremes, our lips glossed cheap cherry. We're not that beautiful, but we're young, which to men we're old enough to know is close. We stare them down, perched on the curb. We bare our thighs like secrets that have hurt us. Sitting there, impatient, one girl might kiss suddenly another, giggling, shadows merging on the pitted sidewalk, eyes open to see if they're seen. And at the very least, there's me, ever the apprentice in tenderness and nerve. When a man eventually, inevitably approaches, we rise as birds do, all at once, flushed and shrieking until we regroup out of reach, our bodies heaving against each other as if we have narrowly escaped a fate we know to fear, but can't name. Then we do it again, to be sure. When the sun swells before the sky's mantling like a rosy bubble, we wander snapping hubba bubba as the streetlights pop on above us, proffer wishes and gossip like they're makeshift stars. We wait for someone to wonder where we are, find ourselves waiting long into the dark. I think we like this part best, the night falling over our shoulders like a borrowed sweatshirt, still warm, the blonde grasses whispering as we circle and circle the unclaimed lot, knowing that we could be forgotten, but are not. And if we listen hard before someone comes for us, some nights our names are called between guitar riffs on the classic rock station, blaring from rusted cars in the bar patio across the street. Songs we know by heart, songs our fathers once sang to our mothers before they were ours or anyone's, ballads that made them believe it was possible they could, a lifetime, love, be loved, desperately, like that.
It's so great. You capture that, everybody when they were children, hated and anticipated with great anxiety and fear the calling of their name because that was time to come home.
Yes.
But also you longed for it. I mean, and when you heard it, there was something about it that was, oh, somebody wants me, somebody misses me, somebody, even though you complained about it, at the same time, it was magical. And that kind of desperation and, romanticism are apparent there, at the end of the poem between the parents, right? They're calling to each other there. Yeah, somewhere out of the dark, that dark. So let's see, you did Trying, let me see. So I did Life on Earth, and then I have another poem called Another Year on Earth. My new book is, I guess, going to be titled Life on Earth.
Yeah.
And which I think is perfect for a book because anything fits under the rubric of Life on Earth, right?
Throw it all in.
Throw it all in. And that's sort of what I have. Yeah. I don't, it's just a bunch of poems and I'm just going to throw them in and call it Life on Earth. But this is called Another Year on Earth. Another year on Earth, another butt in the ashtray. Another ordinary night. But this time I unbolt the door and walk out under the moon's breast, full and milky, her light chiseling the new crop of sunflowers, their crisp yellow collars turned earthward, their seedy eyes closed while the bees sleep. I lean against a tree, fix my eyes on one bright star, maybe Venus, goddess of love and beauty, one of her days longer than a year. She's aging so gracefully, 4,503 billion years old, and she doesn't look a day over an eon. Maybe it's because she has no moons to tie her down, like Jupiter and Saturn, who look haggard and careworn. Jupiter with deep stretch marks and crow's feet. Saturn surrounded by the wreckage of her life. But Venus floats alone in her tabernacle of space, watching TV while she lifts weights like a pro on her living room floor, her red beauty mark enhancing her still kissable lips. Once somebody said, "I dare you," and I did. Jumped off the bluff into deep sea water. I was a teenager, dumb as they come. And when an eddy pulled me under and spit me up against the rocks, I was sure I had completed my last spectacular act on Earth. But the boys dove in and hauled me out so I could get as old as I am now, almost 70, staring up at Venus in my backyard, wearing nothing but a thin nightgown, the warm summer air lifting it up like Marilyn Monroe's skirt, revealing my pocked and lunar thighs.
Ah, so good.
That's going to be in a little anthology of poems about Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, cool.
Hilarious because it's just the very last image that's about Marilyn, nothing about Marilyn.
It's, it's whatever goes. It's like in the arena.
Yeah.
I would love to have hung out with you as a teenager, Dorianne, though I think I would be the very timid one on the side as you leapt in.
I probably took way too many chances. We always talk about how, among my friends who are my same age, that none of us have the right to be here, considering the stupid things we did in our lives.
It's more of that bounty of luck that you have, you're born with all that luck.
I guess so.
Dorianne, I'm gonna read my poem for you. The poem that I wrote for you, and I believe not far from you. I think that I wrote this not terribly far from you, but it was when we about our our ghosts and aliens films.
Yeah.
And for those who
share
don't,
that obsession with ghosts and aliens. Yeah.
We have some more that we'll need to catch up on this summer. I think we'll add a couple to the queue.
Yeah. I mean, we would just sit together in my living room and binge ghost movies and alien movies, and then talk about them in between and eat a bunch of food and then watch another one.
I still think about that one alien movie with the alien that had the baby. That one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the two Lou Gossett, and I can't remember who the other guy was, but yeah.
Yeah, that movie lives in my brain and will just emerge all the time. But this one's not about aliens, it's about ghosts. And it's for Dorianne. Not all of us get to be ghosts. In December, I watch movies about ghosts with a woman I call Mama, though she is not my mother. Only a woman who is kind. This all I require. We take breaks to lean against each other on her porch, her sucking smoke from between her fingers, exhaling its gurling, each mouthful dissipating, becoming something like air. My breath's a less impressive phantom, fleeting silver in the cold light. Standing there in our small shadows, we discuss the ways of the dead, their metaphysics, as if we were experts by osmosis, a certain knowledge absorbed. I think our ghosts become us, or at least reside in our dark, like tenants we haven't the heart to kick out. She says, though she hasn't quite figured it out yet, there are rules. Not all of us get to be ghosts. We linger in the fringes of each other's fading warmth, counting our dead, considering our chances. Given the choice, I'd like to be let go, after, like a balloon wafting toward heaven. But I don't say it. Can't allow my absence the words. Instead, I watch the tiny fire at her mouth, ash on her blouse like the first flakes of snow. then look out at the yard, the bare trees, the night's steady, soundless approach.
I love that so much, Leila. And yeah, when Leila was thinking about coming to NC State to study, I wanted her so badly. And I just, I thought, oh, she has to come. This is the place for her. She may not know this. And, what can I do to convince her? And so I knew that she was Muslim. And there was a young man who I would see every day at the same time when I walked past the parking lot at school at NC State. And so I ended up writing a poem for him, and I sent it to Leila, thinking that this poem would convince her to come. Like, look, there are other Muslims here. There's no need to worry or be, you can leave Michigan. There are Muslims everywhere, and I'm here to prove it. So this is called Autumn Prayer, North Carolina State, and it's for Leila. When I walk to my car, I see him kneeling on a square of dirt beneath a tree, his forehead pressed against a patch of yellow grass. I know he's praying, so I walk lightly, respectfully, my head down so he won't think I'm looking at him. He's maybe 23, thin and kempt, his black jeans and white shirt clean, pressed. Cars roll by, students chat into cell phones. No one seems to notice there's a young man praying. When I get home, I look up Muslim prayer times on the Islamic Finder. Late afternoon, Asr, immediately after the last time limit of Dhuhr until sunset. He must do this all day, no matter where he is. Search for spots of earth between classes, before work, after work, like this one, maybe 3 square feet beneath a young crepe myrtle, native to the Indian subcontinent, 3rd largest Muslim nation, a tree with bark that changes color and produces flowers of many different hues, from deep purple to red to white, with every shade between. Member of the loosestrife family, blessed with simple, ovoid, lustrous, thin-veined leaves that release an aromatic odor when bruised, and sets free in autumn thousands of small winged seeds.
I love that. Oh, I love that. And I love you. That's great.
I love you, sweetheart.
And I
Okay.
think that's maybe now we turn it over to
Yeah.
questions. Yeah. So how should we do this? Read through and
I have no idea. I can see people are saying something, but I can't even begin to read.
okay.
So yes, we have a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to ask Suzanne to unmute, and I will put Suzanne, I'll add a spotlight there for Suzanne. Great. And I think, first of all, I'll just mention the anthology that that Dorianne mentioned. Our 2 co-editors of that anthology are here tonight, Margot Taft-Stever and Susanna H. Case. So that they're also your two of your co-editors for this book, The Mother. So yes, everyone can check that out as well. They put the information in the chat for that.
Marilyn has my birthday.
Oh,
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe and I have
wow.
birthdays.
Do you really?
June 1st, yeah.
Wow. There's a great documentary on her that just came out that is so beautiful and
Ooh.
wonderful and shows you the incredibly powerful, dynamic woman that she was. And
Oh,
really reveals her as this intellectual, this powerhouse of a businesswoman, I mean, all kinds of just
Ooh.
wonderful aspects of her life that we never see. You know,
Yeah.
it's all about Marilyn and, you know, but
Ooh, I'm gonna check, that's gonna also go into my
check
queue.
it out. Yeah.
So I guess the first question we'd like to have you talk a little bit about is how this came into being, this book came into being, and how you decided to format the poems back and forth, and what did you learn about each other and about your work while you were writing it?
Yeah. Yeah, Dorianne had been much more prolific than me during the pandemic. You know, I mean, this ongoing pandemic, but certainly during the intense first part of it. And so Dorianne had a body, like, you know, a number of poems that she already had. And she had sent me them to sort of look at and see maybe what was interesting to me, you know, what kind of things were resonating with me. And I knew already just from our friendship, that she was thinking about her mother, and you know that she had, of course, recently published her new and selected that also includes, you know, some really beautiful poems about her mother. And you know, Dorianne is a mother figure for me, and so of course, like thinking about motherhood and all of these ways that mothers are in our lives, and these sort of like chains of mothers, and thinking about my own relationship to, you know, motherhood. I realized like this is the thing that I'm seeing in these poems, and it's also the thing that I think I need to be writing about right now. So I wrote a number of poems in response to Dorianne's sort of like that subject being kind of the framework that helped me to write some poems, and then also to recognize in other poems where I was thinking about or kind of engaging with that. Yeah, that's, I think, how I came to create some of those poems. Ordering them was interesting. That was kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, you did the order.
We
Yeah, I can't remember.
kind of, how did you do that? It was, I think there were some that it seemed like we kind of knew where they would go. Like we knew that the two poems for each other would be at the end.
Yeah,
And
that much we knew.
yeah, and some of them, like, you know, the poems, you know, life on Earth and thinking about Earth seemed very much in the same vein as like trying to put those poems kind of together. And some of them were like objects, I think, that were linked. I think like one of your poems that has like the newspaper that, you know, dropping the cups.
Right.
Then there's like a poem that follows that involves a newspaper. And so like sometimes like pivoting.
So more subtle linkages, but they all feel linked. It's true. Yeah. I don't know how that happened, but
magic.
But then how did the whole Slapering press, I mean, how did it become a chat? What was the deal? Did you already know that they wanted a chapbook, and so you said, do you have any poems, or were we just
Janet emailed and said, do you think, you know, there's a series, and do you think Dorianne and you would be interested in this? And I said, I definitely think I'd be interested. Let me check with Dorianne. And yeah. And then if you are, as you know, as your wonderful way, interested in everything. So it sounded like, yeah, let's do it. And I was excited because, you know, of course, you know, you're wonderfully talented and busy, and I didn't know how it would fit into your schedule. So I was very glad that we were able to do that. It was good. It was a good, like summer, like late summer, early fall project, I feel.
I remember one time my friends and I were sitting around in a hot tub, bunch of women, and one of them proposed this idea. Well, if you only had one word in your life, you could only say one word. That's all you had available to you. What would that word be? And everyone went around and said a word. And when it got to Jane Hirschfield, she said, my word would be yes.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that is the best answer, you know, yes. Yeah, so
Oh, I love
Ever
that.
since
Jen.
then, I've thought of my life as a series of yeses that have worked out very well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Ah. Now I'm thinking, my brain is going all sorts of places with
I
that.
know.
Well, yeah, yes, that is so lovely. And when Slapering Hol Press started the conversation series, this is really exactly what we hoped would happen, that each pair of poets would organically, or sort of organically, come up with their own chapbook shape. And that's what happens. And it's a joy to hear you talk about that. Should I read another question now, Jennifer? Is that how we do it? All right. Okay, so this question is from Heather Truitt, who writes, I'm currently fascinated by the intersection of motherhood and grief. It seems to me impossible to have one without the other, especially in poetry, rather writing as the mother or the child. What are your thoughts on this, grief and motherhood?
I feel like Dorianne, you and I bonded about some of these ideas very early, and throughout, it's been almost a decade. Isn't that wild to think about? It's almost a decade we've known each other now. I don't know. I think that in my family, mothers and mother adjacent figures died early. So for me, when I think of it automatically, and what I know of my personal experience is that, like, the mother is like a loss, is a place of loss. And of course, I have not had a child, and so but I can imagine that there is a loss that comes from that experience of, this is someone separate from me now, and who will go into the world and have their own life, and that there's a lot of love, but every time I think there's love, there's this constant sort of threat of that loss, because if you love someone so much, then you also deeply fear them in a way. I think you don't want to be hurt by them and their loss. So yeah, I don't know. I think the more I love someone, the more grief there is associated with that. And if I love someone shallowly, then there isn't usually that much grief. So I think there's a beauty to some of that grief, but it definitely, in my experience, seems very present in a way that is different than with fathers. And I'm not quite sure why that is for me. We've talked a little bit about that, Dorianne, too, about kind of the difference between, thinking about mothers and fathers.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, there's a lot of grief attached to motherhood, my mothering, to be sure. I mean, these poems don't go as much into the difficulties I had with my mother as the ones in Only as the Day is Long, the 20 poems for her at the end of the book. The poems included here are much more kind of odes to her, or, because as much, I mean, I don't know about the grief part. The grief part of it, I guess, for me, is that I loved my mother as deeply and passionately as I hated her. And so those two opposing forces were always at work in my relationship with her. And so I grieved the mother I felt I deserved, that I should have, and instead I got this other mother who I completely loved and celebrated, and, the one that danced and made clothes, and, I mean, and my mother was always grieving. She had lost a son, my older brother, at a young age. And, she never got over it. She never got over the loss of her son. So she was always, I mean, one of my biggest most indelible, I guess, memories of her was her sitting underneath the tree on Christmas Eve, crying with a bunch of empty bottles of beer, sitting around her while she cried for the loss of my brother. And this was 20 years, 30 years later, you know.
Mhm.
And so I don't know about that more abstract, you know, grief of motherhood. Certainly I grieve my own parenting, my own mothering of my daughter. Every time I see one of those stupid commercials, you know, like somebody, I don't know, doing something with their kid, taking them to a museum, or you know, riding bikes with them, or you know, some like wonderful idyllic kind of situation, I think I never did that with my daughter.
Mhm.
You know, I didn't do all the things with her that I should have done.
Mhm.
And I didn't, I think I kept her a little bit at bay, maybe, Leila, for some of the same reasons you did.
Mhm.
In terms of your own mother, you know, I could lose
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
person that I love so much. So I kind of kept my distance from her in a way
Yeah.
that was terrible,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and saved that kind of exuberance and that kind of mother I could have been for my friends or for my,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
whoever I was with at the time or whatever. And I thought, no, I should have been giving that to her. What, you know, what was wrong with me?
Mhm.
So I grieve that a lot, that I wasn't the mother I could have been. Of
Mhm.
course, following in my own mother's footsteps, not in as disastrous a way
Mhm.
as, you know, my mother's. So in that respect, it was, you know, of course, a much better. And when years later, I asked my daughter, sitting with her, and I said, I dared to ask her, I said, did you resent me
Mm.
all those years that I was out doing poetry readings and being with my friend, you know, and doing and not paying enough attention to you, and I was just ready. I mean, I was steeled for
Yeah.
her response, you know. And she said, Mom, what are you talking about? You took me to Hawaii. You gave me horse lessons. You would take me and my friends to, and she started just relaying all these things to me. And I'm like, God, I did. You know, of course, I'd completely forgotten all that. And she said, and besides, when you were upstairs writing and you were too busy to take me, or you would say, you know, wait until I get done, you know, he said, my other friends' parents wouldn't take us anywhere. And they were just watching TV. You were writing books. You were doing something important, which, as you can imagine, really made me feel good. So, you know, kids.
Yeah. They're resilient, you know. We're resilient. And I think like something that has happened is that, you know, as I've gotten older, I mean, you know, when you're young and you're an adolescent, so much is like the drama of your parents and the ways that people have failed you. And as I've gotten older, I kind of always overlay my mother's life over my life, you know, to see like, oh, at this age, what was my mother doing? And, you know, and one of the things that I think a lot about now is like, you know, oh, I would have been terrified in these moments, you know, if I were her, and having a lot of compassion for my mother, who lost her mother very young, and did not have a mother, you know, and, you know, feeling this, I don't know, a need to then mother back, you know, and just kind of, it's just changing what it means to be a daughter as I grow older. Yeah, and I have a more complex understanding, more compassion.
That was a great answer, both of you. I'd like to ask a question for my students. A lot of students at the Hudson Valley Writers Center are in the process of writing their first collection of poetry, writing and editing chapbooks and first full-length collections. So what advice would each of you have for those students who are working on their books right now, and keeping in mind that a lot of our students are older students who have gone back to writing after taking time off or raising a family or having a different career?
Yeah. Ooh, I mean, Dorianne is the expert, as she has a number more books than I do. But I guess like the thing that I think about in my own work and what I tell my students is to chase your obsessions, to like be aware of what you are interested in and lean into that. I wouldn't try to write a book you feel like you need to write, or that would be popular, you know, like I would write the book you feel urgently in yourself you need to write, but not necessarily one that you're like, oh, I think that this would sell well, or this would be popular, and so therefore I'm going to write these kind of poems. I think, you know, I did not think that my first book was going to be well received or even published, because I thought that my subject matter was very specific. But that was not the case. So I think trust what you're interested in and lean into that. It's going to make more exciting work for you, and it will be more exciting for the reader. I mean, one thing that I do is a very practical sort of thing is I have a list of questions when I'm working on it. When I know I'm working on a project, I have this like piece of paper on my wall that's just questions. And so, you know, some of these questions are very small things, like Dorianne's, like, who invented the cup? You know, that might be a question that I would have, like, okay, I want to write a poem about this thing, so I need to look this up. But sometimes they're not such a like researchy question. It might be like, okay, what does shame mean to me? You know, something big that has been like unlocked by a poem, and that I know it's like a to-do list almost, like, okay, here are your questions about this thing. If you haven't addressed all these questions, maybe you're not done with the project yet. So it kind of gives me direction. You know, I'm not always ready to address that question when I first have the question in mind, but it gives me like directions to follow while I'm writing. So when I sit at my desk, I know kind of general territory that I might kind of open up and be like, well, maybe I'll try and work on this question today. Let's try and figure it out.
That's great. That's a great idea. I think for my young students, you know, like for instance, the MFA program, Leila, for instance, loved teaching. I mean, she was already a teacher before she came here, and she really, really loved it. And so, of course, you know, she would get very involved with her courses and her students, and, you know, office hours and poring over their work, and, you know, all these wonderful things that you would wish every teacher would do for you as a student. But I remember always cautioning my students, you know, don't give your students too much. You know, number one, they can't take it all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if you give them 57 different comments on their poems, there's only one or two of them that are going to stick, you know, that they're really going to attend to. And, you know, they otherwise it's too much information, you know?
Yeah.
And, but secondly, always do your student work after you've done your own work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know, before you start correcting papers or looking at poems or working on your damn syllabus, you know, set aside, and I don't care if it's 15 minutes or an hour and a half, you know, but just sometime before you begin to work on that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And number one, because that's your job, you know, and it's your big job. The other job is just going to get you money, or, you know, get you through school or whatever, you know, but the other work is your work. I mean, that's what's important in the world. And you then won't resent your students when you go and give to them, you know, because you've already given to yourself first. It's like, put on the oxygen mask before you put the mask on the child, you know, right? I mean, because otherwise you're no use to that child. For older people, I think their lives are so, you know, so full and so just cluttered with the things that they, you know, have to do and have on their minds, that they just need to make that time for themselves too, you know, like, oh, before I go downstairs and tackle that closet, you know,
Write a poem.
write a poem, you know, I mean, sit down and give yourself the time. And I learned this from my daughter, you know, who said, at least you were doing something important. You know, you were writing. You know, it's like what you're doing is important, and just go ahead and allow that to seep into your bones. Yeah. And make sure you have that time for yourself every day, even if you don't use it.
Yeah.
Even if you just sit and look out the window, you know, even if you just sit and read a book, or even if you just read the newspaper because you haven't been, had time to read it. But just some time for you, knowing you're in that writing space, whether or not you utilize it is up to you and the muse and, whatever, but just to give it to yourself as a daily gift, why not? Why the hell not? No one else is going to give it to you. That's for sure.
I love the daily gift, because I call it creative time, and my partner, who is downstairs, I'm at his family home. This is his childhood bedroom, actually. But he knows that I have 2 hours in the morning that are creative time on a good day. It's my creative time. And there's a sign on the door, no one interrupts. It's the same as if I were in a Zoom meeting or something. It's my time. And sometimes I just do sit reading, or looking at I have a bird feeder. So I look at my bird feeder and watch the birds, or, whatever, even, draw or doodle. But it's time that is mine, that it does. And it feels so good. When I'm able to really demand, okay, now I'm going to block off this time. That's my favorite part of, of my day, of my life, maybe. And so I think, respecting, as Dorianne, what you said is so, there's a sign even that I have, because I need visual reminders. It says, this is your job, this is my job. And all of the good things that come, it's because you're right, not because of emails or, grading or whatever. It's because of the writing. And I think people are afraid sometimes to prioritize it. And it doesn't always have to be 2 hours is when I'm lucky, if there's a day that's not teaching or something. But, I can, a 15-minute window does a lot. And, I spend 15 minutes wasting all kinds of time, on something, an email or Facebook or something. So 15 minutes you have, and it is a gift to yourself. So I love that a lot. Yeah, I also believe a lot in setting some sort of checklist goal. I'm a very type A. Setting some kind of I can do this, because I think a manuscript feels so big, and you might think oh, I don't think I can tackle that. But you can tackle I need to write 5 poems about X or something. And then, you're oh, I've already written 1 poem about X. So now I'm 20% of the way there. I'll do things like that, where I'll break it down into manageable chunks that then I'm oh, okay, I need to read 20 pages of this book. I can do 20 pages. Even if that's 1 page a day, I'm checking it off. It helps break down these big things, because the manuscript can feel very frightening. And it's, even if you say I'm going to write every Sunday, and I'm going to write a poem every Sunday, after a month of Sundays, you're well into, a section of a book. So I think, just remember that it's a little bit and a little bit and a little bit as a book. So just do those little chunks.
And just to follow up on that, your thoughts on revision. These poems that you read tonight feel so polished and so finished. Just some tidbits for the students in the audience about revision, and how do you know for yourself when a poem is done with the revision process?
I revise strangely. So I don't know if I'm always the best person for advice about it, because I think of poems as I'm writing them, because I'm a sonic poet. There's that wonderful essay, The Four Temperaments by Gregory Orr, where he talks about sort of the different gifts of the poet. And I'm a sound poet, definitely. That's my first thing. So when I'm writing, I read out loud what I'm writing. And as I'm working down the page, I'm reading it to myself. So every time I make a change, I'm rereading from the beginning to hear how it goes. So if I later go back and tinker, it can sometimes break some of these sound things that I'm doing. So I think of it like wet cement. While it's still wet, I can fiddle, and that's maybe a 5 or 6 line range. But once I get beyond that, so let's say I'm down to line 15, I'm not going to go up to line 4 and fiddle anymore. That part is done. And if this poem doesn't work by the time I get to the end, I throw it away, or I keep it in a saved file, but it's not a poem that I'm going to do something with. And I start again the next day, and I open up a completely blank document, and I might say okay, I wanted to write about, pearls. So let's try and write another pearl poem, but we're not going to copy and paste. We're just going to start again. That's how I write, for good or bad. That's the way that it works for me. But sometimes I'll take a very long time to work on a poem. Sometimes a poem will be in progress for months. So it'll be the first 4 lines and I'm happy with them. But before I move to the next, I need to be ready to then go to the next and then sit with those next 4 lines and then, move on. What I tell my students though about revision, how I know if a poem's ready or not, if I feel comfortable with the poem, is I ask myself if there's a toothpaste moment. And so if you are a renter like me, you may have known this trick of if you put holes in your walls you're not supposed to have, and you can put toothpaste to try and like spackle the holes away so your landlord doesn't find out. So I ask my students, like, do you have a toothpaste moment? Like, is there a moment you don't want anyone to notice in the poem that you kind of covered up haphazardly? That you're just hoping nobody looks at it too closely. And I know when I'm doing that in a poem, I'll be like, oh God, I hope nobody notices in this stanza. I kind of made this pretty weak, metaphor. Like I said something that's not really true, it doesn't feel true to me, or it feels cheesy, or it feels like maybe in someone else's voice. If I feel that little, like, please don't look over here feeling, I know the poem's not ready. So that's my, like, my final, I guess, check before I'm ready to sort of let other people see it by publishing it, is if I feel a little weird protectiveness about part of it.
I love that toothpaste moments. Makes me think of a terrible story about my sister. When she told me she was a cop, and she had a boyfriend who was a cop, and he came over one night and he was so mad at her, he actually took out his gun and shot at her.
Oh my God.
He missed her, and the bullet went through the wall behind her. And I said, oh my God, are you kidding me? And she goes, oh no, I just put some toothpaste over the hole.
Oh my God. That's
That's what you thought I was responding to.
Oh my
the hole in the wall,
Oh my God.
But anyway, she's a whole other book that I'm working on, but yeah, that idea of, because you can fool yourself into thinking this is okay, or well, this will pass, or whatever. And I'll just say one little trick that I've more recently learned for myself is to, when I finish writing a poem, to read it backwards. So I take it out of context and I look at each line. Is each line doing something? Does each line have something in it that makes it worthy of being a line, makes it worthy of staying in this poem, or is it slack? Is it not really either tight or saying really, like you were saying, Leila? I mean, is it really true? Is it really, if I just take it out of context, what is this line doing? And that helps a lot. I end up doing a lot of revision by looking at it back. It's also a very good thing for editing. Editing a book, don't read the poems forward, because you'll just fill in all the typos and the missing words or whatever. If you read it backwards, you'll notice them.
I love that.
Because they're out of context. You're not expecting the next line.
Yeah.
I feel as though you're mothering each of us here today who have poems in process. We're just leaning close and taking it all in. Wonderful advice. Are there any questions? Any other questions? Oh. I'm wishing we could sit here all night and talk, but I don't think we can. I think, Jennifer, do you say goodnight for all of us?
Yes, we have one more question in the chat. If and it might be a long answer, so just give us your short answer to it. Someone wrote, speaking of family, how do you feel about sharing what you've written about family members that are living?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's a question I get from students a lot. I think, all of us probably are grappling with that in one way or another. There's like the Anne Lamott advice where she says, if someone doesn't want you to have written about them, then they shouldn't have behaved poorly, basically, or badly, that basically you have a right to your stories. And I do believe in that school of thought generally. I would say is that, you are your own person. You do not You certainly don't owe loyalty to anyone who's harmed you. I think that's in terms of, silence. I think you can have other kinds of loyalty, but you don't have to silence yourself. But I think not every poem you write needs to be a poem you publish immediately. And that's my other school of thought, I think. And Dorianne, you were the one actually who gave me this first kind of bit of advice, because when I had come to NC State, flown out as a prospective student and was thinking about getting my MFA, I told Dorianne, this is all wonderful. It's amazing, the idea of being able to teach and get time to read and write and learn. And I wasn't in a writing community. I was a special education teacher. So the idea of like spending time with this phenomenal poet who I adored and just writing poems sounded great. But I was really afraid of what writing the poems that I felt I had to write might do to my relationships with people in my life. And you were smoking a cigarette. We were sitting out at outside in the courtyard. And I don't know if you remember it, but you looked at me and you said, Leila, nobody reads poems. And
What did I say?
you said nobody reads poems. And you were, which I was like, oh, okay, like I'm thinking about changing my life to come out here. Okay, that's good to know. And but it really actually was very comforting. And you said, nobody's going to see this, that you're afraid might see it. And then you also said, you owe it to yourself to learn how to write the poems. And that's what you're here to do. And once you write them, you get to decide what you do with them. So if you publish them in a year or in 5 years or after they're dead or after you're dead, that's all choices you can make after the fact, but you should know how to write the poem. And I very much, and then then the story is now we're here. So clearly I took that advice. And I really believe in that. I think that you definitely owe yourself writing the poems, and you should not try and staunch that. Like if you're writing and you feel that urgency, write those poems and write them truthfully. But you can be strategic about what you do with the poems. You could also be caring, because I don't think every, relationships are complicated. And there are people who may have harmed us earlier in life who are now quite good to us. And now maybe there's been reparative work. And so you want to be true of your experience, but also kind to the present. So I would say with some poems, I choose to publish them in print as opposed to online, so they're less Googleable. I wait with some poems until they feel less hot, if that makes sense. So if I feel like very nervous at the idea of someone reading them, then I know that I'm not ready to carry them into the world yet. And that's okay. I have other poems to write. Then those sit in a drawer, like Sharon, Sharon put Stag's Leap, in a drawer. And, I also realized people are generally a lot more generous and kind than we maybe give them credit for. And so even if we think that folks might be hurt, you might be surprised by their open heartedness, maybe. Yeah, their response. They might actually, my family, I thought they did not want to be written about. And when my chapbook came out, they were like tallying how many times they each appeared, like who won the tally of showing up. So I think, you might be surprised. Sometimes people are honored to be on your mind.
Yeah, I find that, the power of the printed page is, a great heal-all, It's like whatever you say about them in the poem that's in the magazine or the book, they may not like it, but they're so proud of you. It's like they want to show it to their friends, it's like, look, my daughter wrote a poem about, And so there's that, the power of that. But also, I've just given myself a very simple rule in my life that has worked so far. I'm not saying it would work for everyone or that it will always work for me, but whoever has more power than I do, I have complete reign to say anything I want about that person because they have more power than me. My mother, no matter how old I get, how old she get, she will always be the one with the power, right? I can write a poem about Cher because Cher has more power than I do,
All of us, really. I mean,
so many ways. But, I can write about anyone that has more power than I do. People who have less power than me, I'm much more careful with. A younger sister or brother, a friend, who isn't a writer and who doesn't have the power that I do to be able to put something out in the larger world, however small that is, as we know, as poets. But nevertheless, then I always ask their permission. Read this, see if this is okay with you. And if it's not, you have veto rights. And then I usually tell a story about Linda Paston writing a poem for her mother who was dying in the hospital. And she sat in the hospital room and she wrote this poem about her dying mother who would be dead soon. And she talked about her after her death and, whatever. And when she finished the poem, her mother was still alive. And it was really clear she was dying, but she didn't die. And this went on for, as you can imagine, weeks, months, years, And finally, she showed her mother the poem, completely fearful that she would freak out, that, what are you doing sitting by my bedside thinking I'm going to die, And her mother read the poem and she said, Linda, how could you tell people that I wear a wig? That was what freaked her out. And, my mom, I have poems about her in my first book that are just, but what she really worried about was people knowing she drank a 6-pack of beer before she went to bed. She said, that's not true. I don't do that. You can't say that, So I changed it to a dark beer, like just one. She was happy with that. So you never know anyway what they're going to say, and it, like Leila says, it could completely surprise you. And so just write the goddamn poem.
Amen.
That is good advice. And I think on that note, we will thank everyone once again. And thank you, Suzanne Cleary, for your beautiful introductions. Thank you to all of our co-editors, Margot Taft-Stever, our founding and current co-editor, and Mervyn Taylor, and Susanna H. Case, and all of the advisory committee, most of whom are here tonight, all of our SHP poets. We want to thank all of you for being here to support these wonderful poets. And you'll get an email tomorrow from Sophia with your code for free shipping if you pre-order The Mothers. So please do that. And we look forward to hearing both of you read again. Thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate your time and your involvement in this project. SHP is very grateful to you.
We're so grateful to you. Thank you. Thank you. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much. We'll save the chat and we'll send it to you.
Yay, that'd be great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody out there in the virtual world. We love you. Write poems.
Oh, we love you back.